Welcome, dear listener. You've arrived once again in the quiet corner of the internet where stories drift more slowly and history is allowed to stretch itself out like a calm river at dusk. I'm the sleepy historian, and this is boring history for sleep. A soft-spoken journey into the past, told gently, with the aim not of keeping you awake, but of easing you toward rest. Tonight's story is called Secrets of Ancient Roman Bathhouses Revealed. If this kind of calm storytelling helps you rest, feel free to like this video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. And if you feel comfortable, share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. There's something oddly comforting in knowing that others, perhaps scattered across the world, are also drifting towards sleep with the same slow rhythm of ancient stories. So dim the lights. Let your mind grow quiet. Allow the hum of the present day to soften as we step together into the distant world of Rome. A world not defined by its emperors and battles, but by the subtler patterns of everyday life, by the steam, the marble, the rituals, and the quiet murmurs that filled the bathhouses of the ancient city. Bathhouses in Rome were not merely places to wash the dust of the streets away. They were spaces of rhythm and routine, where the body was cleansed, where conversations flowed as easily as water, and where the architecture itself was designed to soothe, impress, and remind each visitor of the grand order of Roman life. Imagine yourself walking through colonnades and courtyards, hearing the steady splash of fountains, feeling the coolness of stone beneath bare feet, and the warmth of air thick with vapor, perfumed faintly with oils. These were not private spaces tucked away in homes, but monumental halls where the humblest citizen and the loftiest official might, at least in theory, share the same pools. Some came for cleanliness, some for exercise, some for philosophy, and some merely to pass the time. And yet, through all their differences, the bathhouses offered a rhythm of life that has echoed across centuries. Over the course of this journey, we will drift through 4 gentle explorations. First, we'll step into the rhythms of daily life, imagining the bathhouse through the eyes of ordinary Romans. Then, we'll pause to wander through a story, a biography, an event woven into the long thread of Roman bathing culture. Later, we will explore the more mysterious elements, the archaeology, the hidden corners, the cultural meanings that still leave questions behind. And finally, we'll contrast these rituals with the lives of the elite, the ways in which baths became statements of wealth, status, and civic pride. As always, our path will not be hurried. You are free to listen closely, to let your thoughts wander, or to let sleep slowly arrive as the story continues in the background. There will be no sudden shifts, no harsh notes, only the steady, measured rhythm of history told for rest. So let us begin. Step softly, as if through marble doorways and shaded gardens, into the world of the Roman bathhouse. Here, in the quiet between echoes, history waits to be told. Imagine, if you will, that you are waking in the early hours of a Roman morning. The city is stirring, though not yet in full motion. From the streets, you hear the sound of carts being pushed along uneven paving stones and the occasional call of a vendor preparing for the day's trade. The air is cool, carrying faint traces of smoke from hearths lit to prepare breakfast. Yet, for many citizens of Rome, whether of modest standing or comfortable means, this day will, at some point, lead them toward the bathhouse. The bathhouse was woven into the fabric of daily life. It was not only a place of cleansing, but also a place of rhythm, an almost meditative pause in the day. In a world before private plumbing, these grand public complexes served as both necessity and luxury. For a modest fee, or sometimes none at all, one could step from the dust of the streets into an environment designed for care of the body and the mind. Picture yourself arriving at the gates of a bathhouse. The exterior might appear imposing at first. Tall walls, carefully laid masonry, decorative columns hinting at grandeur within. Some bathhouses were immense, capable of welcoming thousands at once. Others were smaller neighborhood establishments. Still, each one represented a microcosm of Roman society, a place where people crossed paths, lingered, and shared the same air thickened by steam. Stepping inside, the first impression is often of space. Long corridors, tiled floors, echoes softened by high ceilings. There is a rhythm to the movement here. Visitors disrobing, storing their garments, walking barefoot across cool stone surfaces toward the sequence of rooms that awaited. These rooms were arranged with purpose, guiding the visitor through stages of warmth, cleanliness, and repose. The apoditerium, or changing room, was often adorned with benches and niches, sometimes decorated with simple frescoes. Here, attendants might keep an eye on belongings while visitors folded away their tunics and sandals. From there, the journey continued. Some would choose to exercise first, in open courtyards or adjoining gymnasia, where balls were tossed, discus thrown, or bodies strengthened in preparation for the indulgence of water and heat. Others moved directly into the sequence of bathing chambers, each with its own climate, its own effect upon the body. The tepidarium, with its gentle warmth, often served as a place of transition. Imagine a room softly heated, air pleasantly heavy, walls gleaming with polished stone or painted scenes, benches along the sides where bathers might linger, talking in hushed tones or resting in silence. From here, one might proceed to the caldarium, the hot room, where the air was dense with steam rising from basins of heated water. The warmth penetrated the skin, loosening muscles, drawing sweat. The floors were heated from beneath by ingenious Roman hypocaust systems, channels carrying hot air beneath the tiles. You might feel the faintest vibration of warmth rising through the soles of your feet. After the intensity of heat, relief awaited in the frigidarium, a chamber of cool, refreshing pools. The shock of cold water brought a sharp contrast, though in this setting, it was embraced as part of the ritual. Imagine the plunge, a moment of awakening, followed by a return to calm. The daily rhythm of the bathhouse was not simply physical. It was social too. Men gathered to discuss business, philosophy, or the latest proclamations from the Senate. Women, in designated times or separate establishments, also enjoyed the ritual, though the historical evidence is more fragmented. Children might accompany parents, learning early the customs of communal bathing. In these halls, conversations echoed gently, blending with the sound of trickling fountains and the occasional laughter carried along by steam. For some, the bathhouse was an escape from the press of the city streets, from the smells of crowded tenements, from the demands of work, from the unrelenting noise of urban life. Inside, one could linger in a realm of marble and water, where even the poorest could feel, for a moment, the dignity of shared ritual. For others, it was a chance to display refinement, to carry fine oils, to have one's skin massaged, to stroll slowly with an air of ease. The architecture reinforced these feelings. Sunlight filtered in through carefully placed windows, often high and arched, casting shafts of light into steamy air. Statues stood in niches, reminders of gods or benefactors who had endowed the space. The air smelled faintly of olive oil, of resin, of sweat tempered by stone. It was not silence, but a harmony of gentle sound, never jarring, always steady. In this rhythm, we can sense the heartbeat of Rome, not in its armies or conquests, but in its daily habits. The bathhouse became a theater of ordinary life, where the body was tended, the mind was refreshed, and the soul was soothed by repetition. For you, listening now, imagine yourself seated upon a marble bench, eyes half closed, as the warmth seeps into your limbs and the gentle murmur of voices becomes indistinct. This is not a place of urgency, but of surrender to a slower pace. The bathhouse was not merely about water, but about continuity. Each visit followed a familiar path, undressing, exercising, sweating, scraping the skin with strigils, cooling, oiling, dressing again. Day after day, Romans walked these paths, repeating them until they became second nature. For the listener tonight, drifting towards sleep, there's a comfort in that sameness. The echo of countless footsteps following the same order, as steady and timeless as the rising and setting of the sun. Sequence of rooms, and instead attend to the textures of the experience. Imagine yourself not as a distant observer, but as someone seated quietly, towel in hand, breathing in the humid air that curls and shifts around columns of stone. The journey began in the changing room, yet here, in the inner chambers, time itself feels softened. The ordinary bustle of the streets, with their cries of merchants and the clatter of hooves, becomes a faraway murmur. Within these walls, the rhythm of life is measured differently, by the pace of sweat gathering upon skin, by the slow scrape of oil from the body, by the unhurried plunge into water that calms the senses. The ritual of bathing was as much about method as it was about refreshment. The Romans used strigils, curved metal tools, often bronze or iron, shaped to follow the contours of the body. Coated in oil, the skin was scraped gently to remove dirt and perspiration. Attendants sometimes performed the task, though many prefer to do it themselves, in a gesture both practical and almost meditative. The sound of a strigil gliding across oiled skin was faint yet distinct, a part of the soundscape of the bathhouse. To the modern ear, such a practice may seem unusual, but to the Roman bather, it was as natural as washing one's hands. Imagine the variety of people who gathered here. A farmer, having sold his produce at market, arrives with weary muscles and dust upon his feet. A young apprentice, eager to appear at ease among older men, watches carefully, imitating gestures and routines. A retired soldier, bearing the stiffness of old wounds, sighs deeply as heat loosens his joints. In another corner, a scholar debates philosophy with a companion, voices low but steady, echoing softly against marble walls. The bathhouse was a rare equalizer. Though divisions of class and wealth remained clear, there was a shared ritual that carried a quiet sense of belonging. The design of the spaces encouraged lingering. Benches lined the walls, niches offered places to sit, and water was ever present, dripping, flowing, or contained in basins. Some rooms held small fountains, their trickling sound steady and calming, a counterpoint to the deeper resonance of voices. Imagine the feel of condensation gathering on cool stone, tiny droplets sliding down surfaces worn smooth by years of touch. Light filtered down from high windows, shifting gently as the day passed. The spaces were alive, not with urgency, but with continuity. It was not unusual to see the rituals extend over hours. Visitors might enter in the early afternoon, after the main work of the day was done, and remain until evening. Some would exercise vigorously, wrestling or running in the palestra before cleansing themselves. Others spent time in discussion, or even in listening to readings. Poets, philosophers, and politicians sometimes used the baths as informal forums. Ideas flowed here as readily as water. Food and drink were part of the experience too. Vendors sometimes offered light snacks, bread, fruit, or wine diluted with water. Though feasting was left for other venues, a bather might refresh himself with a fig or a handful of nuts, the sweetness mingling with the warmth of the air. The mingling of senses, the taste of food, the smell of oils, the feel of steam, the sound of laughter, created a layered experience. Consider, too, the role of slaves and attendants. They moved quietly among the bathers, carrying oils, fetching water, assisting with massages, or keeping watch over belongings. Their presence was constant, yet often unnoticed by those lost in their routines. To the wealthy, the bathhouse was yet another stage upon which status was displayed, with personal attendants carrying finely crafted vessels of oil and elaborate cloths. To the commoner, the attendants of the bathhouse itself were part of the fabric of the place, as natural as the stone beneath one's feet. And then there were the sounds beyond human voices. The crackle of fires beneath the hypocaust, feeding the heat that rose through floors and walls. The splash of water as bathers entered or left pools. The faint whisper of wind through high openings, sometimes carrying the smell of the city into the sanctuary within. These sounds, layered and constant, created an atmosphere that could lull the mind into a kind of waking dream. For those seeking not just physical relief, but a sense of connection, the bathhouse offered subtle forms of community. It was here that friendships were strengthened, that news was exchanged, that one might feel the pulse of the city itself. To sit quietly in the corner of a tepidarium, watching the ebb and flow of people, was to see Rome in miniature, its citizens moving together in a ritual that was both deeply personal and broadly shared. At times, festivals or significant events brought special crowds, and the baths became even more animated. Yet even then, the pace remained measured, the rituals unchanged. Warmth followed coolness, oil followed sweat, rest followed movement. The constancy of the order allowed the mind to relax, knowing each step would lead to the next, just as it had for generations. For you, listening now, imagine your body surrendering to the heat, the air dense and embracing, every breath slower, every thought softened by repetition. The bathhouse was not a place of rush or urgency. It was, in its way, a sanctuary of slowness, a space where the cares of the outside world could be momentarily dissolved into steam. And as you picture it now, you may find yourself mirroring that pace, letting go of urgency, drifting gently into a calmer rhythm, much as the Romans themselves once did. As the rhythm of the bathhouse unfolds, we begin to see not only the practices of cleansing and relaxation, but the deeper ways in which these rituals mirrored Roman society. For many, the bathhouse was a second home, a place where familiarity bred comfort, where one knew what to expect, and where the sequence of events repeated in reliable harmony. Imagine the progression of a typical visit. Having exercised in the palestra, or having chosen to forego exertion, a visitor would move carefully from room to room, guided not by written instructions, but by custom. The warmth of the tepidarium, the intensity of the caldarium, the plunge of the frigidarium. Each stage carried not only physical effects, but symbolic ones as well. Warmth and release, purification through sweat, renewal and coldness. These sensations were not dramatic, but gently transformative, allowing the mind to shift into a calmer state. Within the caldarium, the air hung heavy, scented faintly with oils, sometimes resinous, sometimes floral. The glassy surface of basins reflected the flicker of light from oil lamps. The walls, often tiled or covered with mosaics, held images of gods, sea creatures, or geometric designs, their colors muted in the mist. Here, the act of bathing became almost ritualized. The body glistened with sweat, pores opened, muscles slackened, and conversation slowed into murmurs. Some sat quietly in contemplation, others leaned against stone ledges, eyes half closed. Contrast this with the frigidarium, where stillness gave way to a sudden awakening. Pools of cool water stood ready, sometimes large enough for several bathers at once, sometimes smaller, designed for individual plunges. The shock of cold was sharp but brief, followed by a lingering clarity. It was said that the alternation between heat and cold invigorated the body, strengthening resilience. For the Romans, this was not discomfort, but completion, a cycle that felt natural and restorative. The rhythm extended beyond the water itself, oiling the skin, scraping away dirt, and finally dressing again in clean garments all formed part of the closure. Some lingered afterward in shaded porticos, enjoying the quiet satisfaction of refreshment. Others went on to dinner parties, civic meetings, or household duties, carrying with them the calm and cleanliness the bathhouse provided. There is, in these details, a sense of collective intimacy. Bathing in public required a certain comfort with the presence of others. The boundaries of privacy, as we understand them today, were different. Bodies of all shapes and ages shared the same spaces, stripped of most adornment, equal under the sheen of oil and sweat. In this, the bathhouse was an environment where distinctions of wealth and class softened, even if only slightly. While some patrons arrived with attendants and fine oils, while others came with little more than a towel. Once immersed in steam and water, the differences were blurred. And yet, even in this apparent equality, subtle markers persisted. Wealthier citizens might recline more comfortably, using finer cloths or paying attendants to massage tired limbs. They might speak more confidently, their words carrying an air of authority even within casual conversations. Meanwhile, the poor might keep to corners, quieter, their presence less noticeable. Still, the shared experience bound them together in a way few other spaces could manage. Imagine, too, the children who grew up with these rituals. They learned the customs of bathing, the sequence of rooms, the gestures of scraping oil and plunging into pools. For them, the bathhouse was not exotic or unusual, but part of the fabric of life, as ordinary as bread at the table, as constant as the rising sun. They saw their elders converse, their peers play in the water, their mothers or fathers relax in quiet moments of respite. In time, they too would inherit the rhythms, passing them on silently to the next generation. To stand in a Roman bathhouse, one would not only see people cleansing their bodies, but also witness Rome itself in miniature. Citizens and foreigners, men and women at different hours, slaves and free, all entered these halls. The mingling of languages, the variety of appearances, the contrast of rich perfumes with simple sweat, all spoke to the diversity of the empire. In the baths, one could hear accents from distant provinces, the chatter of traders, the mutter of officials, the laughter of children. The bathhouse thus served as both sanctuary and mirror. Sanctuary, because within its walls one escaped the dust and noise of the streets. Mirror, because here the vastness of Roman life, its classes, its customs, its mixture of peoples, could be glimpsed in microcosm. As we reflect on this daily immersion, it becomes clear that these rituals were not trivial, not merely a matter of cleanliness. They represented values, order, repetition, communal life, and the idea that the body itself was worthy of care. In a world often harsh, where disease and hardship lingered close, the bathhouse offered a reminder that comfort was possible, that renewal was attainable, even if only for a short while. And for us, drifting gently with these images, the bathhouse becomes more than stone and water. It becomes a rhythm, a slow pattern of movement and sound that calms the imagination. Picture again the faint trickle of fountains, the gentle scrape of strigils, the muffled voices, the rising steam. Let them settle in your mind as steady, recurring notes, like the breathing of the city itself. In that rhythm, you may find yourself relaxing more deeply, mirroring the calm that Romans sought so long ago. While the rhythms of the bathhouse shaped daily life for countless ordinary Romans, there were also figures whose names linger in history, remembered for the way they influenced, expanded, or celebrated this culture of water and stone. To understand their impact, let us drift slowly into a biographical moment, a glimpse at one such life intertwined with the history of bathing. Our subject is not a general or emperor known for battles. Instead, imagine Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, the trusted friend and son-in-law of Augustus, Rome's first emperor. Agrippa was a man of practicality, a builder, a planner, someone who saw the city not merely as a seat of power, but as a living organism that required nourishment, order, and care. Agrippa's name is forever linked with water. He supervised aqueducts, fountains, sewers, and most importantly for our story, the bathhouses. In the 1st century BCE, as Rome grew and swelled with people, the need for organized spaces of bathing became more apparent. Earlier bathhouses had existed, but Agrippa expanded the vision, elevating them into civic monuments. He constructed the magnificent baths of Agrippa, which became a model for those that followed. Picture Agrippa walking the streets of Rome, hearing the calls of vendors, seeing the press of citizens, and noting the importance of water in their lives. The aqueducts carried it from distant hills. The fountains distributed it across neighborhoods. The sewers carried it away. But the bathhouse was where water was transformed from a necessity of life into a shared experience of comfort and renewal. Agrippa understood this, and in his projects, he sought to weave water into the very fabric of the city's culture. The baths of Agrippa, built around 25 BCE, were among the first large-scale public bathhouses of Rome. They stood near the Pantheon in the Campus Martius, and though later expansions and reconstructions altered the landscape, the original creation left a lasting impression. Imagine entering those early halls, mosaics gleaming faintly in lamplight, marble surfaces smooth and cool, air resonant with the gentle echo of voices. These baths were free to the public, a gift to the people, and a symbol of the new order Augustus and Agrippa wished to establish, where civic life was enriched by generosity and grandeur. Agrippa did not merely construct the baths. He also endowed them with beauty. Statues, fountains, and decorative works adorn the complex. He even placed there a massive, circular hall, the first of its kind, which inspired later architectural marvels. Water flowed through the structure with abundance, supplied by the Aqua Virgo aqueduct, another of Agrippa's achievements. To the ordinary Roman citizen, entering the baths of Agrippa must have felt like stepping into a vision of the city's greatness, embodied not in conquest but in stone, water, and light. The generosity of the baths was a political gesture as well. By providing such spaces freely, Agrippa and Augustus aligned themselves with the people, presenting the new era not only as a time of order and stability, but as one of comfort. Rome was no longer just the city of narrow streets and crowded insulae. It was a city of monuments designed for all. Consider the impact on daily life. A farmer, newly arrived in the city, might find in the baths a place to rest and wash. A merchant, weary from trade, could linger in warm steam and feel restored. A philosopher might sit on marble benches, debating ideas with companions as water trickled nearby. For all of them, the baths of Agrippa were not only a place of relief, but also a symbol that Rome itself cared for its people. The life of Agrippa illustrates something profound about the Roman approach to public works. His legacy was not one of personal wealth displayed in private villas, but of shared spaces where the collective body of Rome could find ease. His vision, practical and generous, set a standard for the great imperial baths that followed. The baths of Nero, the baths of Caracalla, the baths of Diocletian. All of these later constructions carried within them the seed planted by Agrippa, the idea that bathing was not merely an act of hygiene, but a civic ritual worthy of grandeur. In imagining Agrippa, it is helpful to see him not as a distant statue in marble, but as a man of presence. He was known for his steady loyalty to Augustus, his military successes, and his administrative skill. Yet perhaps his greatest gift was his ability to look beyond power itself, to the lives of ordinary citizens. By building aqueducts, sewers, fountains, and baths, he gave Rome not just the image of empire, but the substance of daily comfort. For us, drifting through this biography, there's something soothing in the thought of a man who used his power to create spaces of calm. Imagine him standing in a newly completed bathhouse, hearing the murmur of citizens, seeing steam rise, and knowing that his work would ease their burdens. There is a stillness in that image, a harmony between ambition and generosity that lingers softly in the story of Rome. The baths of Agrippa no longer stand as they once did. Time has worn them away, replaced and overshadowed by later monuments. Yet their memory persists in fragments of stone, in references from ancient writers, and in the enduring idea that Rome's greatness was measured not only by its armies, but also by its ability to nurture its people. And as we rest within this thought, we recognize that the story of Agrippa is not one of drama, but of continuity, a man who wove water and stone together to create sanctuaries where the weary could find respite. In this, he is not unlike the narrator of a story, building structures not for excitement, but for peace. When we think of the Roman baths, it is tempting to imagine them only as silent monuments of stone, water, and steam. But behind every bathhouse, there are people whose choices, ambitions, and vision gave them shape. If Agrippa marked the beginning of Rome's great bathhouse tradition, others continued and expanded it, leaving their own imprint on the city's rhythm of bathing. Consider the Emperor Titus, remembered primarily for completing the Colosseum, but also known for his generosity in public works. In the year 80 CE, when Rome was struck by disasters, a fire, and later the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, Titus sought to reassure the people by giving, not taking. Among his gifts were the baths of Titus, built on the slopes of the Esquiline Hill. Though smaller than later imperial baths, they were richly adorned, offering citizens not only comfort, but also beauty in a time of hardship. The baths of Titus included frescoes, mosaics, and gardens. Imagine citizens walking there in the aftermath of crisis, seeking not merely cleanliness but also reassurance. The act of entering a space where order, design, and warmth prevailed must have offered relief from the chaos outside. For Titus, the baths were a way to heal his city, not with words but with stone, water, and ritual. In that gesture, he revealed the political and emotional power these structures could hold. A century later, the tradition reached an extraordinary height with the baths of Caracalla, among the most monumental ever constructed. Caracalla himself was a figure of contradictions, remembered for cruelty and suspicion, yet also for leaving behind one of the most impressive complexes in Rome. His baths, completed in the early 3rd century CE, could hold thousands at once. There were not only bathing halls, but also gardens, libraries, and spaces for exercise. Imagine approaching such a place, towering walls rising against the sky, intricate mosaics lining the floors, vast domed chambers filled with light filtering down from clear-story windows. The sheer scale was overwhelming, intended to impress upon every visitor the grandeur of Rome and, by extension, the authority of the emperor. To walk through the baths of Caracalla was to step into a world that dwarfed the individual, where architecture itself became a silent proclamation of power. Yet even in their magnificence, the baths remained accessible. Ordinary citizens could enter, move through the same spaces as elites, and enjoy the same rhythms of steam and water. Caracalla, like Agrippa before him, understood that generosity could bind people to the emperor. Even if he ruled harshly in other ways, his baths provided comfort, and comfort could soften resentment, at least for a time. The experience of the baths was heightened by decoration. Marble statues stood in niches, columns rose in orderly lines, and floors displayed mosaics of mythological scenes. Dolphins, sea nymphs, gods of water. These images connected the act of bathing with divine symbolism, reminding Romans that water was sacred, that cleansing and renewal had cosmic as well as earthly significance. Imagine lying on a stone bench in the tepidarium, opening your eyes, and seeing above you the glitter of colored glass, arranged in patterns that caught the light. The effect was not only physical relaxation, but a sense of participating in something larger, something enduring. Another figure who expanded the culture of bathing was Emperor Diocletian. His baths, completed around 305 CE, were the largest Rome had ever seen, sprawling over acres, capable of hosting thousands. They were so vast that later centuries repurposed their ruins into churches, cloisters, and dwellings. The baths of Diocletian stood as a symbol of imperial might, yet they also carried forward the tradition of public generosity. Even as the empire faced difficulties, inflation, invasions, internal strife, Diocletian's baths represented continuity, a reminder that Rome's daily rituals would endure. Think of the message these emperors sent through stone and water. To build a bathhouse was not simply to provide cleanliness. It was to say, Rome is abundant. Rome is eternal. Rome cares for its people. The ordinary bather, stepping into the caldarium, may not have thought consciously of politics, yet the grandeur of the space whispered these truths nonetheless. The architecture spoke on behalf of the emperor, wrapping citizens in warmth, light, and order. And so, when we reflect on these figures, Agrippa, Titus, Caracalla, Diocletian, we see more than names etched into history. We see the evolution of a tradition, each ruler adding a layer, each bathhouse expanding the vision of what these places could be. From Agrippa's first generous gift to Diocletian's immense complex, the story of the baths is also the story of Rome's self-image. Practical, generous, grand, and enduring. For us, hearing these stories in quiet reflection, there is comfort in recognizing how much effort went into creating spaces of rest. Even rulers remembered for cruelty or harshness contributed to the legacy of calm. The contrast itself is striking. Emperors of war and suspicion providing sanctuaries of steam and silence. History often holds such contradictions, and in them we find both irony and depth. Imagine, as you drift now, walking slowly through one of these imperial bathhouses. The marble underfoot is cool and smooth. The ceilings rise so high that voices echo softly, never harshly. Sunlight filters in from above, catching the mist, turning it into drifting golden haze. Around you are fellow citizens, some talking quietly, others resting with eyes closed, some stepping into pools. It is a space of abundance, yet it feels calm, steady, measured. This was the gift of Rome's rulers, to create places where time seemed to pause and the worries of the world fell away with the steam. As the centuries unfolded, the Roman bathhouse continued to evolve, shaped not only by emperors but by the countless individuals who designed, managed, and used them. Though we often attribute these grand constructions to a single patron, an emperor, a statesman, a wealthy patron, their reality was the result of thousands of hands, minds, and routines. The biography of the Roman bathhouse is, in truth, a collective one. Architects and engineers, inheritors of traditions from Greece and Etruria, developed complex systems of heating and water management. Beneath the polished floors of the caldarium, hypocausts glowed with steady heat. Slaves stoked fires, unseen yet essential. Aqueducts carried water across miles, their silent arches standing against hillsides and valleys. All of these pieces work together to create the simple experience of stepping into a warm pool. When we imagine the emperors, we must also remember the quiet figures whose skill made their visions real. Then there were the bath attendants, men and women who offered oils, towels, or assistance. They are less often remembered in inscriptions, but their presence was constant. For some, a visit to the baths included a massage, perfumed oil rubbed into tired limbs, or help in scraping away sweat and dust with a strigil. Imagine the rhythm. The scrape of bronze against skin, the splash of water in stone basins, the murmured exchanges between attendant and patron. For those who worked there, the bathhouse was both livelihood and endless repetition, day after day, year after year. Patrons themselves varied greatly. Senators might arrive, surrounded by clients, discussing politics as they moved from chamber to chamber. Merchants came after long hours in the marketplace, easing the weight of labor from their shoulders. Freedmen and slaves, when allowed, shared in the ritual, though often at different hours. The baths, while grand in scale, were woven into daily routine with a regularity that was almost ordinary. That ordinariness was part of their power, grandeur made familiar, magnificence made accessible. Some emperors, like Hadrian, were remembered for refinement rather than sheer size. His own villa outside Rome contained private baths of elegant design, integrating Greek influence with Roman tradition. Hadrian traveled widely and drew from what he saw, blending styles to create spaces that reflected a cosmopolitan vision of empire. His architectural curiosity enriched not only his own residences, but influenced broader trends in how baths were conceived. Less as isolated chambers, more as integrated complexes blending gardens, art, and water. The personal habits of emperors also shaped the story. Augustus, the first emperor, is said to have bathed sparingly, preferring simplicity. His restraint contrasted with later rulers who bathed daily, even multiple times a day. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, noted the baths in his meditations, observing the mundane realities oil, sweat, dirt, water mixed together, as a metaphor for the impermanence of all things. In his detached reflections, the bathhouse became not only a place of cleansing, but of philosophical contemplation. In the later empire, as resources grew strained, bathhouses took on a different meaning. Maintaining the massive structures became difficult, yet their symbolic importance remained. Even when the empire faced pressure from invasions and economic decline, the act of sustaining the baths suggested continuity. For as long as citizens could still step into warm water, they could still believe in Rome's stability. In this way, the bathhouse became both a physical space and a psychological anchor. We might imagine one final figure, not an emperor or philosopher, but an ordinary Roman. Perhaps a woman living in the 3rd century, her life filled with routine tasks. She rises early, tends to household duties, sells goods in the market. By afternoon, she makes her way to the baths. She pays her small fee, leaves her sandals at the entrance, and steps inside. The noise of the city fades behind her. The rhythm of water, the warmth of stone, the steady pattern of rooms provides her with something rare, a pause. She is not remembered by name, yet her experience is as essential to the story as any ruler's ambition. In the end, the biography of Roman bathhouses is not simply about construction dates and names of emperors. It is about human intention, the desire for comfort, the use of architecture as generosity, the blending of the private and the public. It is about emperors using stone to express power, philosophers using steam as a metaphor, workers finding employment in maintaining fires and cleaning pools, and citizens discovering, in the midst of empire, a moment of stillness. And when we step back, the rhythm of their lives becomes almost meditative. Each day, baths opened their doors. Each day, water was heated, fires were stoked, pools were filled. Each day, citizens arrived, cleansed themselves, spoke quietly, rested, and then left. Over and over, year after year, century after century. The cycle itself is calming to consider, a steady pulse in the background of Rome's often turbulent history. If you close your eyes now, you might imagine yourself walking out of such a bathhouse at dusk. The air outside is cooler, carrying the scent of dust and bread from nearby stalls. Behind you, the building still hums with life. Before you, the streets of Rome spread out, crowded yet familiar. For a moment, your skin is warm, your body light, your mind quiet. In that sensation, you touch something Romans knew well. The peace that follows immersion, the calm that follows heat. When we turn from the lives of emperors and citizens to the traces left behind, the Roman bathhouse becomes something more than an historical curiosity. It becomes an archaeological puzzle, a layered testimony of stone, tile, and pipework that has endured for nearly 2 millennia. Beneath the ruins we see today lies a quiet story of survival and rediscovery, of patterns half buried in soil and memory. The first mystery is the sheer endurance of these structures. Walk through the baths of Caracalla or the remains of Diocletian's baths, and the scale is still overwhelming. Arched vaults rise like fragments of a lost cathedral. Broken mosaics glimmer faintly under dust. The foundations extend in regular lines, suggesting order even in ruin. The question naturally arises: how did such spaces endure centuries of neglect, earthquakes, repurposing, and weathering? The answer lies in the meticulous engineering of Roman builders, whose attention to detail ensured that even fragments would stand as silent witnesses to their ambition. Archaeologists piecing together the story of the baths often work with partial clues. A series of brick stamps may reveal when repairs were made. A stray coin buried in plaster may date a later renovation. Pipes of lead and terracotta suggest the direction of water flow. Each discovery adds another brushstroke to the portrait of what once was, yet the picture is never complete. This incompleteness is part of the allure. A bathhouse is never fully restored in the mind, but always half real, half imagined, hovering between ruin and reconstruction. Among the most intriguing discoveries are the hidden heating systems. Beneath the floors, archaeologists find small pillars of brick arranged in orderly grids. These formed the hypocaust, through which hot air circulated, warming stone floors and pools. To walk among them today, in the exposed understructures, is to glimpse the skeleton of warmth itself. Where once mist rose and bodies rested, now we see only rows of low supports and blackened plaster. Yet with imagination, one can feel the lingering warmth, as though the fires never quite died. Mosaics also tell their own stories. In some bathhouses, fragments of intricate design survive. Dolphins leaping through waves, nereids riding sea creatures, geometric patterns of colored stone. These images remind us that bathing was not merely functional, but aesthetic, a ritual accompanied by beauty. The mosaics are more than decoration. They are metaphors in stone, binding the act of cleansing with the imagery of water deities and eternal cycles. Each tessera, each small piece, whispers of craftsmen's hands, patiently fitting color to color, building images meant to last. There are also mysteries of use. While literary sources describe routines of bathing, archaeologists must rely on the arrangement of rooms, the wear of steps, the flow of drains to confirm these accounts. Did people linger longer in the caldarium or the tepidarium? Did certain pools serve ritual as well as comfort? Inscriptions sometimes dedicate spaces to gods, hinting that bathing carried spiritual dimensions. To cleanse the body may also have been to prepare the spirit, to honor deities of water, health, and transition. At times, discoveries overturn assumptions. In the ruins of Pompeii, smaller private baths reveal that even households aspired to replicate the experience of public complexes, though on a more modest scale. Pipes still carry mineral traces, plaster still bears impressions of steam. Here, in these intimate spaces, the grandeur of Caracalla is translated into domestic rhythm. Archaeology reveals not only what emperors built, but how ordinary citizens imitated them, shrinking the empire's generosity into manageable proportions. Another enduring question concerns gender and access. Some bathhouses included separate spaces for men and women. Others allowed mixed bathing at certain hours. The evidence is fragmentary. Mosaics hint, writers complain, but archaeology reveals shifting practices. What seems consistent is that the bathhouse, in all its forms, mirrored society, reflecting class, gender, and hierarchy while also softening them. The ruins remind us of this ambiguity. where stone walls divide, but steam and water unify. The mystery extends to sound and atmosphere. In ruins, silence dominates. Birds nest in arches. Wind moves through hollow spaces. Yet once, these halls resonated with voices, laughter, the splash of water, the scrape of strigils. Archaeology gives us no recording, only surfaces that absorb sound. And so, when we wander among fallen blocks and cracked pools, we must imagine the soft echoes of conversation, the rhythm of water flowing, the murmured life of a vanished crowd. Ultimately, the archaeology of Roman baths is not a complete revelation, but an invitation. It invites us to fill gaps with gentle imagination, to see in fragments a whole. It is a reminder that even in ruin, comfort lingers. Stones cracked by centuries still carry the memory of warmth. Empty pools still suggest immersion. Mosaics, chipped and faded, still glimmer faintly like the reflection of water under lamplight. As you let your thoughts drift, picture yourself walking quietly through such a ruin at dusk. Grass grows between stones. The walls are streaked with lichen. Above, the sky deepens into twilight. You place your hand on a cool block of marble, once smooth, now roughened by time. And for a moment, you feel the distance of centuries dissolve. The ruins do not speak loudly. They whisper gently, persistently, that life once filled these halls. And in that whisper is a calm reminder of continuity. Generations pass, empires rise and fall, but the human desire for warmth, water, and rest endures. As we continue exploring the archaeology of Roman baths, one realizes that their remains are not merely about stone walls and crumbling pools. They're about layers of meaning, each stratum of soil holding small fragments of daily life. Excavations have revealed not only architecture, but also objects left behind by bathers. Oil flasks, strigils, fragments of jewelry, even graffiti etched into plaster. These traces, modest and easily overlooked, bring us closer to the rhythms of ordinary Romans than any grand mosaic ever could. In some bathhouses, walls bear faint inscriptions scratched by visitors. Simple phrases like Felix hic fuit, Felix was here, remind us that people of long ago left their marks in ways both humble and familiar. Imagine leaning against a warm wall, waiting for a friend, absent-mindedly carving initials. 2,000 years later, that casual act becomes evidence, linking the quiet moment of a stranger to our own time. Archaeology transforms such marks into voices across centuries. Even the plumbing of Roman baths tells a story. Lead pipes, inscribed with the names of emperors or officials, reveal who sponsored construction or repair. Terracotta drains, still stained by centuries of mineral deposits, show how water once flowed. Some archaeologists have studied the residue in these pipes to learn about water quality, mineral content, and even public health. It is humbling to think that every drop of water passed through channels designed with remarkable foresight, guided by the steady slope of aqueducts that still stand in places across Europe. Another aspect of mystery lies in the scale of effort required. To heat the baths of Caracalla, estimates suggest that hundreds of slaves tended furnaces day and night. Archaeological digs have uncovered the remains of massive cisterns nearby, built to hold vast reserves of water. These storage systems, often overlooked by casual visitors, were engineering marvels in themselves. When we stand among ruins today, it is easy to admire soaring arches, yet the unseen infrastructure, the pipes, the cisterns, the channels, carried equal importance. Without them, the baths would be nothing but cold halls. Sometimes discoveries are surprisingly intimate. A collection of hairpins found in a drain suggests that women bathed there, despite debates among scholars about access. Rings lost in pools tell of small, personal dramas. A slip, a gesture, a piece of identity vanishing into the water. Even animal bones, carried by stray dogs or discarded as refuse, give texture to the scene. Archaeology is not always about grandeur. It is often about fragments of lives, preserved by accident. Pompeii and Herculaneum, sealed by volcanic ash in 79 CE, preserve bathhouses almost like time capsules. Walls still bear frescoes of mythological scenes. Benches still line changing rooms. Pools still hold the impressions of steps. In Herculaneum, wooden shelves survived, carbonized but intact, showing how oils and perfumes might have been stored. Walking through these spaces, one senses not only ruin but interruption, as though the bathers might return at any moment. The ash froze life mid-step, allowing us to see details usually lost to centuries of erosion. One enduring mystery concerns the experience of sound and light within intact baths. Archaeologists and architects have attempted reconstructions, studying how sunlight entered through clear-story windows, how echoes bounced within domed chambers. Experimental archaeologists have even lit fires in reconstructed hypocausts, measuring temperatures, watching how steam rose. These experiments remind us that archaeology is not only about what we see, but about what we sense: warmth, resonance, brightness, dimensions that ruins alone cannot show. There is also the question of ritual. While Roman writers speak of bathing as leisure, some evidence suggests layers of symbolism. Dedications to gods, such as Fortuna, or Asclepius hint at connections between bathing and health, fortune, or rebirth. Archaeologists occasionally uncover altars or small shrines within or near bath complexes. Were these places purely secular, or did they also carry sacred weight? The ambiguity lingers, unresolved but enticing. At times, archaeology reveals unexpected continuities. In some parts of the Mediterranean, later cultures reused Roman bathhouses, adapting them to new customs. In the Byzantine era, certain baths were converted into churches. In the Islamic world, Roman models influenced hammams, public baths that carried forward traditions of cleansing, community, and ritual. Standing in such spaces, one senses a continuity of human desire for warmth and renewal, crossing religious and cultural boundaries. Yet with every discovery, there are silences. Entire bathhouses are lost beneath modern cities, their remains inaccessible. Others crumble slowly, exposed to weather. Archaeologists must make choices to excavate or preserve, to uncover or leave hidden. Each decision carries consequences, for excavation reveals but also exposes to decay. The mystery of Roman baths is therefore not only in what we learn, but in what we allow to remain unseen, waiting for future generations to uncover. If you pause now and let your imagination wander, picture yourself standing beside an archaeologist at dawn. The site is quiet, covered in tarps and tools. As the sun rises, golden light strikes the remains of a mosaic, making its blues and reds glow faintly. The archaeologist brushes away soil, revealing a pattern unseen for centuries. In that moment, time folds. You feel both the weight of the past and the delicacy of its survival. The baths, once filled with life, now offer their stories slowly, gently, like secrets shared in whispers. As the story of Roman baths continues through archaeology and memory, one realizes that what remains today is as much absence as presence. Ruins are defined not only by what is visible, but by what has been lost. Missing roofs, shattered pools, eroded frescoes. These silences form part of the experience. And yet, within those silences, imagination finds space to wander. The mystery of scale is one such silence. Ancient writers tell us of baths capable of hosting thousands. Yet when we walk among ruins, the full effect is diminished. The upper floors often collapsed, once held galleries where spectators could stroll, where sunlight poured through vast windows. Archaeologists reconstruct these spaces in drawings and models, but standing on the ground, we glimpse only fragments. To imagine the baths complete is to restore not only stone, but also the atmosphere, the steam, the voices, the rhythm of footsteps echoing beneath domes. Another layer of mystery lies in the sense that once filled these halls. Archaeology offers only faint traces, jars that may have held perfumes, residues of oils, charred remains of incense. The Romans prized fragrances, myrrh, rose, cinnamon, spikenard, often imported from far lands. When citizens left the baths, their bodies carried not just the warmth of water, but the soft veil of scented oils. To imagine this is to sense a dimension invisible to ruins, an aroma long faded yet integral to the experience. Sound, too, is elusive. Today, the ruins are hushed, interrupted only by birds or distant traffic. Yet once, they resonated with a gentle cacophony. Laughter, conversations, splashing, the scrape of strigils, the hiss of steam. Archaeologists studying acoustics suggest that domed ceilings amplified certain tones, creating a low hum of resonance. We can never hear it directly, but in imagination, it is easy to picture the comforting hum of voices mingling with water. Some mysteries are practical. How exactly were the fires of the Hypocaust managed to keep such large spaces warm? How many workers were needed to maintain constant heat? Written records are vague, leaving archaeologists to estimate. Charcoal remains, ash deposits, and soot patterns on walls provide hints, but no complete answers. It is humbling to consider that what was once a routine task, feeding furnaces, carrying fuel, is now a subject of scholarly speculation. What was ordinary to them is mysterious to us. Artifacts continue to refine our understanding. Inscriptions discovered in bathhouses sometimes named donors who funded repairs or guilds responsible for maintenance. These reveal networks of civic responsibility often overlooked in grand narratives of emperors. The baths were communal in construction as well as in use, woven into the fabric of cities. Archaeology uncovers not just stones, but the human web that sustained them. Even natural elements preserve mysteries. Mineral deposits on pipes suggest what waters flowed through them, some rich in sulfur, others in calcium. In certain sites, archaeologists test residues to learn whether baths had therapeutic purposes connected to local springs. These chemical echoes offer a different kind of testimony, one not written in words, but in molecules, enduring across centuries. There are also unanswered questions about decline. As the Western Empire weakened, many bathhouses fell into disrepair. Some were dismantled for stone, others repurposed as workshops or housing. Archaeology reveals these transitions in layers. A collapsed wall patched with rough masonry, a bath chamber converted into a smithy, coins of later centuries mixed into older drains. The slow transformation from grandeur to utility is as much a story as the original construction. At times, the mystery is personal. Small finds, a child's toy dropped in a changing room, a stylus used for writing, a lamp left behind, hint at individual lives. These objects are modest, yet they touch us with immediacy. We may not know names or faces, but we sense presence. A child playing, a student carrying notes, a bather walking away and forgetting a lamp. Archaeology gives no full biographies, only fragments, but those fragments resonate deeply. Perhaps the greatest mystery is how much of the bathhouse experience remains accessible to us through imagination. We cannot reconstruct every detail, but we can stand in the ruins and sense continuity. We feel the solidity of stone underfoot. We see the arches against the sky. We hear wind echoing where voices once resounded. Archaeology shows us the outlines, and imagination fills them gently. If you close your eyes now, You might picture yourself walking at night through the ruins of a bathhouse. Moonlight filters through broken arches. The air is cool, carrying the scent of grass. You step carefully over uneven stones, pausing to listen. The silence is not empty. It is layered with centuries of memory. For a moment, you feel surrounded by the faint echo of lives once lived, of warmth once shared. And in that soft awareness, the mystery of the Roman baths is not frightening, but comforting. Proof that what humans build and cherish, even when broken, can endure in spirit long after its walls fall. In the grand mosaic of Roman life, the bathhouse was more than a practical facility. It was a stage upon which social roles unfolded, where the powerful and the humble brushed against one another, where appearances mattered as much as the warmth of water. To step into a Thermae was to enter a world where class distinctions softened, yet never disappeared entirely. For the elite, the bathhouse was an extension of influence. Senators and wealthy landowners arrived attended by slaves who carried oils, towels, and sometimes even folding stools. Their presence announced itself not only through fine garments, but also in the manner of entry. Confident, practiced, unhurried. To bathe was not merely to cleanse, but to be seen, to remind others of status. The wealthy might choose hours when the baths were less crowded, arranging private access or reserving smaller chambers. For ordinary citizens, the experience was equally meaningful, though shaped by different concerns. A laborer might arrive dusty from work, grateful for the relief of warm water easing sore muscles. A shopkeeper might come in the evening, closing business for the day, seeking a moment of leisure among neighbors. The baths were a place where conversation flowed easily, where matters of trade, politics, or local gossip mingled with the steam. For them, the bath was not luxury, but a rhythm of community. The design of the baths reinforced these subtle distinctions. In some complexes, separate entrances guided different groups. Fees could be waived by wealthy patrons, but the sense of hierarchy persisted. The finer oils and perfumes were accessible to those with means, while simpler unguents sufficed for others. Slaves often attended not for their own bathing, but to serve their masters. Still, the shared water blurred lines. Everyone, regardless of rank, moved through the same cycles of heat, steam, and cooling. There were also gender contrasts. In some cities, women had their own facilities, either in separate wings or entirely distinct buildings. At times, schedules alternated. Men in the morning, women in the afternoon. These arrangements varied across the empire, shaped by local custom. For women of means, the bathhouse was both leisure and display, a chance to wear fine jewelry, to exchange news, to arrange marriages or alliances. For working women, the bath offered respite from daily labor, a moment to step beyond household routines. Among the most striking aspects of the baths was the way they mingled social ritual with physical care. To be seen was as important as to feel refreshed. Patrons lingered in open courtyards, discussing law or philosophy. Athletes exercised in palaestry, their strength observed by onlookers. Orators sometimes tested speeches in the echoing chambers, practicing words that would later be delivered in forums. The baths were not merely cleansing spaces, but arenas of subtle performance. For the emperor, too, baths carried symbolic weight. To construct or restore a great bathhouse was to project generosity, to link imperial grandeur with public comfort. Emperors who built Thermae ensured their names endured in stone inscriptions. Citizens bathing in those waters participated, however unconsciously, in a ritual of loyalty. To thank the gods for health, to thank the emperor for generosity, the two gestures often blended. Yet, beneath this display, contrast persisted. Not everyone enjoyed equal ease. The poorest sometimes relied on smaller neighborhood balnei, lacking the grandeur of imperial Thermae. These modest baths, though humble, still offered warmth and sociability, but their scale was intimate rather than monumental. The contrast between the gleaming marble of Rome's central baths and the modest brick of rural facilities mirrors the broader inequalities of the empire. One might imagine the scene in a great bathhouse, a senator reclining on a bench, discussing the latest decree. Nearby, a craftsman shares news of market prices with a friend. In another corner, a soldier recently returned from the frontier recounts tales of distant lands. Though their clothing, voices, and confidence differ, all share the same steam-filled air. The water touches them equally, binding them briefly in a ritual of renewal. Children, too, were part of this life. Young boys might follow fathers, splashing in shallow pools, learning the rhythms of Roman sociability. Older youths exercised, playing ball games or running laps in palaestri, their laughter echoing through colonnades. For them, the baths were not only about cleanliness but about initiation into adult life, a place to watch elders, to imitate, to absorb unspoken codes of behavior. Even religion intertwined with bathing. Small shrines to gods, often Fortuna or Asclepius, appeared near entrances or within courtyards. Bathing was both a physical and spiritual act, tied to notions of purity. Some visitors might whisper prayers before entering, seeking protection or healing. Others might make small offerings, blending ritual with routine. The baths were also places of exchange beyond words. Merchants negotiated contracts. Philosophers debated ethics. Lovers exchanged glances. The steam softened sharp lines of class, gender, or occupation, creating a fluid space where encounters could be unexpected. Yet beneath it all, the unspoken awareness of rank remained, guiding gestures, speech, and opportunity. To walk through the Thermae was to step into a mirror of Roman society. Not a perfect reflection, but a softened one. Differences remained visible, yet were tempered by the universality of human need. Warmth, cleanliness, conversation, belonging. In this balance of contrast and commonality, the Roman baths stand as a symbol of how empire functioned. Diverse, unequal, yet bound together by shared rituals of daily life. When we linger longer in the world of Roman bathhouses, the contrast between social classes and lifestyles become even clearer. The Thermae did not erase the differences of rank, but rather displayed them in subtle and revealing ways. Observing these patterns, even centuries later, provides insight into the rhythms of Roman society as a whole. The elite might arrive with retinues, stepping from litters borne by slaves, perfumed and attended, their jewelry catching the sun. Inside the bathhouse, they could pay for the finest oils, sometimes imported from as far as Arabia or India. After bathing, they might be massaged with scented unguents, the process as much about displaying refinement as about relaxation. In their company, poets recited verses, philosophers discussed ideas, and politicians carefully shaped alliances. For them, the bathhouse was an office without walls, a theater without curtains. The middle classes and working poor experienced the bath in different ways. They might come after the toil of daily labor. A craftsman leaving his shop, a farmer returning from the fields, a mason with dust still clinging to his hair. For them, the warmth of the caldarium or the refreshment of the frigidarium was not a backdrop for politics, but a bodily relief, a restoration before the next day's exertions. Their conversations circled around wages, food prices, or family concerns, and though less gilded, they were no less important. Slaves, often overlooked in accounts of Roman life, also passed through the baths, though not always as free participants. Many entered as attendants, tasked with carrying water, tending fires, or assisting their masters in cleansing. Yet at times, they too were permitted to bathe, sharing in a luxury otherwise beyond reach. For a brief moment, the heat of the hypocaust warmed them as it did their owners. the steam curled around them as around senators. Even here, however, the balance of power was unmistakable. They were reminded of their role through labor, presence, and absence alike. Within the same walls, therefore, lives intersected but never fully merged. The baths could host senators and soldiers, merchants and masons, women and children, slaves and freedmen. Each found something different, a venue for influence, a sanctuary of relief, a fleeting joy, or a routine necessity. The mingling was real, yet always tempered by invisible hierarchies that shaped interactions. Architecture reinforced these patterns. In larger bathhouses, the grandest halls were designed for open gathering, their soaring ceilings and polished marble serving as a backdrop for spectacle. Smaller chambers allowed quieter encounters. The sequence of rooms, hot, warm, cold, drew everyone through a similar rhythm, but the experience was tiered by access to oils, masseurs, and attendants. Even in shared water, distinctions remained in the quality of service and in the company one kept. Some elite patrons turned the baths into stages for generosity. Wealthy benefactors occasionally paid entrance fees for entire days, allowing poorer citizens free access. These gestures reinforced patronage networks, binding communities together with gratitude and loyalty. A citizen who enjoyed such largesse might later remember the generosity when voting or when supporting a patron's family. Thus, bathing was political in ways both subtle and profound. Meanwhile, the atmosphere itself softened edges. Steam obscured harsh lines of rank, and the hum of voices created an environment where one could overhear conversations that might otherwise remain hidden. A young artisan might catch fragments of senatorial debate. A soldier might glimpse a nobleman's scars. For a brief instance, lives ran parallel, overlapping in warmth and water before separating again into the broader structure of society. Gender added its own layer of complexity. Women's bathing arrangements were not uniform across the empire. In some places, women's facilities were simpler, smaller, or scheduled at less convenient hours. In others, they rivaled men's in size and luxury. Among elite women, the baths became places of fashion and alliance, where garments and jewels were displayed, marriages were discussed, and subtle rivalries played out. Among poorer women, the focus remained on cleansing, respite, and companionship. Across these differences, however, the baths offered women spaces of relative independence in a society that often restricted their public roles. Children, again, remind us of the human scale of these rituals. A boy running through the colonnade, a girl learning to swim in a shallow pool, laughter echoing across marble. These simple moments bring warmth to the imagination. Archaeological evidence of toys, small sandals, or inscriptions carved by young hands tells us that the baths were not only adult spaces, but also sites of growth, play, and memory. Religion also mingled with social life here. Dedications to gods within the baths reflected not only piety, but also the blending of daily necessity with spiritual protection. An elite visitor might dedicate a statue, while a poorer citizen left a small coin or lamp. The divine presence wove through steam and stone, reminding all who enter that health and cleanliness were gifts as much as they were routines. One cannot forget the contrast between city and countryside. In Rome and other great cities, the baths were vast, opulent, and thronged with visitors. In smaller towns, they were more modest, but no less central. The hum of activity might differ in scale, but the rhythm of social interaction, cleansing, conversing, resting, remained a constant across the empire. To wander mentally through these settings is to see Roman society itself, layered in marble and steam. The elite glittered, the commoners gathered, the enslaved served, the children learned, and the gods presided quietly from alcoves. All these threads met within the baths, forming a tapestry of contrast and connection. The water that flowed through pipes and pools bound them together in ways both fleeting and enduring, offering us today a glimpse of how empire lived, breathed, and remembered itself. When we consider Roman baths as a social institution, it is tempting to see only their grandeur and charm. Yet the truest picture emerges not from a single viewpoint, but from a balance of contrasts. The baths brought together emperor and artisan, senator and soldier, matron and child, slave and freedman. All entered seeking warmth, cleanliness, and community, but their experiences were shaped by status, wealth, and circumstance. For the privileged, bathing could extend into rituals of refinement. Imagine a nobleman reclining after the caldarium, attended by a slave who carefully applied fragrant oil. Friends might gather nearby, discussing the empire's affairs, their words echoing gently off marble walls. The sense of leisure was deliberate, a way of affirming one's place above the press of ordinary life. Every gesture, the choice of oil, the cadence of speech, the way one lingered in a hall, reinforced the identity of the elite. For others, the baths were practical. A craftsman who spent the day chiseling stone, or a merchant who stood long hours in a market stall, would seek restoration. The heat loosened tired muscles, the cool water refreshed the skin. In conversation with neighbors, they shared news, frustrations, and laughter. Their enjoyment lay not in display, but in relief and in the familiar rhythm of routine. The enslaved inhabited both worlds at once, present in nearly every chamber yet rarely fully included. They lit the fires, carried the water, held oils, and served food. Some were permitted to bathe after duties, experiencing fleeting comfort. Others only touched the baths through labor, their relationship one of service rather than relaxation. Archaeology leaves few direct traces of these lives, yet one imagines their quiet presence as essential to the functioning of the grand ritual. Children's voices, often overlooked in accounts of history, must have filled these spaces too. A boy splashing in a shallow pool, a girl skipping along polished floors, their laughter breaking the solemnity of adult conversation. For them, the baths were places of play, exploration, and subtle instruction. Watching elders move with practiced ease, they absorbed lessons about hierarchy, sociability, and belonging. The bathhouse was in its own way a classroom of Roman identity. The baths also reveal Rome's ideals about community and empire. To bathe together was to share in the fruits of civilization, the aqueducts that carried water, the furnaces that warmed chambers, the architects who shaped beauty from stone. Participation, whether in a modest balneum or in the colossal baths of Caracalla, tied individuals to the collective grandeur of Rome. It was a statement that the empire's resources extended into daily life, offering not only roads and laws, but also warmth, leisure, and health. Yet differences remained. While some citizens enjoyed marble pools and gilded ceilings, others visited small, plain establishments in provincial towns. While the wealthy could afford perfumed oils and skilled masseurs, the poor settled for simple unguents. The common rhythm of bathing masked but did not erase inequality. The baths, therefore, serve as a metaphor for Rome itself, a structure that encompassed many, uniting them in shared practices while still dividing them by wealth and rank. Religious and philosophical undercurrents added depth to this experience. To some Romans, bathing was tied to health of body and spirit, a reflection of balance and harmony. Stoic philosophers might argue that the baths were necessary but not indulgent, a place to maintain the body without surrendering to luxury. Others, more hedonistic, embraced the baths as arenas of pleasure and beauty. Within the same steam-filled chambers, these outlooks coexisted, each bather interpreting the ritual through a personal lens. Even time itself created contrasts. The morning bathers tended to be those with leisure, the wealthy, the retired, the idle. In the evening, the working classes filled the halls, seeking respite at day's end. Thus, the baths shifted character over the course of the day, reflecting the rhythms of Roman labor and leisure. To walk through at dawn, midday, and dusk was to glimpse three different faces of the same institution. As centuries passed, the meaning of baths evolved. What had once been symbols of unity and grandeur became reminders of loss as the empire faltered. Some baths fell silent, their marble stripped for other buildings, their pools filled with rubble. Others transformed, housing workshops or shelters. Yet, even in decline, they remained social markers, spaces where memory lingered, where echoes of former gatherings seemed to whisper against ruined stone. For the modern visitor, these contrasts still speak. To stand in the shadow of broken arches is to imagine the mingling of classes, the sound of laughter, the quiet labor of the unseen. The ruins invite reflection on what endures, the human desire for warmth, for community, for recognition. Though the empire has vanished, the bathhouse reveals continuity in human need. And so, the Roman baths remind us of a paradox. They were both equalizing and dividing, both common and exclusive, both practical and symbolic. In their steam-filled chambers, one could find refreshment and relief, but also politics, philosophy, and hierarchy. They were spaces where the grandeur of Rome met the simplicity of daily life, where the elite displayed power and the commoner found respite, where contrast shaped community rather than dissolving it. As we prepare to leave the baths behind, the lingering image is one of mingled lives, woven together in stone and steam. The baths embody the empire's complexity, immense, diverse, unequal, yet enduring in memory. And in reflecting on those contrasts, we find ourselves gently guided toward a broader view of history not as spectacle, but as the quiet rhythm of countless lives, overlapping in ways both ordinary and profound. And so, we come to the end of our slow journey through the Roman bathhouses, not as tourists rushing through ruins, but as quiet visitors who lingered in steam-filled chambers, walked shaded courtyards, and listened for the whispers of lives long gone. We have wandered among daily rituals, paused with emperors and artisans, uncovered mysteries in stones and fragments, and traced the contrast between wealth and poverty, privilege and labor, power and community. As you rest now, you might let the story settle gently in your thoughts. Imagine the warmth of the caldarium softening your muscles, the cool touch of marble under your feet, the murmur of voices rising and fading in echoing halls. These images are not demanding. They drift like mist, calming the mind. Just as Romans once moved from hot to warm to cold, so too can you move from wakefulness toward the quiet rhythm of sleep. History, when told softly, is less about grand battles or dramatic moments, and more about the quiet threads that tie people together across centuries. The Romans bathed for health, for conversation, for belonging. And though their empire has long since faded, those same desires remain within us. To seek comfort, to share spaces, to find stillness at the end of the day. These are constants of human life. If this gentle storytelling has helped you relax, if it has carried you a little closer to rest, you might choose to support this journey. A like, a comment, or a subscription helps the channel grow, but only if it truly brings you peace. You might even share in the comments where you're listening from and at what time of day. There's a special comfort in knowing that across the world, others are drifting towards sleep with the same quiet stories. As you let go now, allow the past to dissolve into silence. Picture the ruins under a calm sky, moonlight soft upon broken arches. The baths are empty, the voices long gone, yet the memory of warmth lingers. You are safe here, far from the noise of the day, wrapped instead in history's gentle embrace. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and let the rhythm of ancient waters guide you toward rest. The sleepy historian will always be here, waiting with another soft story, another quiet journey through the past. Until then, may you drift peacefully into dreams, carrying with you the calm of Roman baths and the knowledge that even in history's ruins, serenity endures. Good night.